Shalom and welcome once again to Pearls of the Torah. I'm Moreh Matan, Pastor Matt McEwen, and I'm so glad to be with you. And this year, this is a brand new Torah cycle for 5785. So we are at the very beginning of the Torah. We have rolled the scroll all the way back to Parashat Bereshit, and we're going to start there. In years past, we've done things like the commentary Wellspring of Torah. We last year went through each week through several commentaries. We had Sforno and Maimonides and various others that we would read with a messianic insight into each of those commentaries. And we had a wonderful time last year at Pearls of the Torah. This year we're doing something a bit different, and we're going to be looking at a commentary in the Torah, or on the Torah, named the Or HaChaim. Now, as is the case in many times in Judaism, there is a rabbi that has this title, and his title is based on a famous work that he did. So the Or HaChaim is a commentary. This means, by the way, in English, the light of life, the or the light, HaChaim, the light of life. But the rabbi who wrote this, who is also known by this title, the Or HaChaim, is Rabbi Chaim ben Moshe ibn Attar. Now, he was born in 1696 and died in 1743. And as I said, like many famous rabbis, he is known by the title of his most famous work. Now, he is probably the most prominent rabbi of Morocco. A very famous rabbi from Morocco, and we'll get into a little bit of his backstory in just a moment. He was born in Saleh, Morocco in 1696, and he was the son of Rabbi Moshe ben Attar and the grandson of Rabbi Chaim ben Attar the elder. And when he was 9 years old, his family went to Morocco, and he stayed there for a long time. They actually were escaping from some anti-Semitism. The vizier from the country where he was, he moved into Meknes, Morocco, and he married a relative of his whose father supported him, letting him study the Torah without having the burden of supporting a household, which of course was a tremendous blessing, a tremendous gift. Now, when his father-in-law died in 1724, his financial situation worsened. Now, he had one particular wife, and they had no children. He had another wife, and they had children, but he only had daughters. But on Friday nights, he would study the Torah with them, and the commentaries that he would give, the studies that he would give, and his explanations on the Torah portion later were written down, and this became this commentary known as the Or HaChaim. Now, when famine hit Morocco, he decided to leave and settle in the land of Israel, which actually at that time was part of the Ottoman Empire, part of Ottoman Syria. And en route, he was detained in Livorno by the rich members of the Jewish community who established a yeshiva for him in 1739. So many of his pupils later became prominent and furnished him with the funds to publish his very famous work known as the Or HaChaim, or the Light of Life. So let's look now a bit into Parashat Bereshit and the commentary of Or HaChaim. Number one, let's look at the creation of the world. So in Genesis 1, chapter 1, of course, we have this famous phrase of Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, Or HaChaim says that this word, Bereshit, is very unique. And he quotes about the uniqueness of this word by saying that several interpretations can be given on the meaning of this word Bereshit. Of course, it can mean in the beginning. I mean, that's the most obvious meaning. In the beginning, Reshit is the beginning, and the prefix there of the bet means in. So in the beginning, that's a literal translation. But he tells us, the Or HaChaim tells us that this can imply, the word Bereshit can imply for the sake of, or rather than in the beginning, it can be translated with the beginning. When we say that something is, with the beginning, or for the sake of the beginning, of course, we think of the beginning as Mashiach. And so for the benefit of the Mashiach, for the sake of the Messiah, or with the beginning, in other words, through the agency of this one who is called the beginning, then we have the creation of everything. Now, of course, Torah and Israel are integral to creation, and the Torah is a blueprint of the universe. Rabbi Shapira loves to tell us how in Tractate Sanhedrin that there's this wonderful quote that everything was created for the days of the Messiah, that everything in the universe has only one purpose, and that is for the days of the Messiah. Now, there is a spiritual depth behind creation, and not just a physical act. It's not just a cosmic event, but it has moral and spiritual implications as well. And I think sometimes religious people get a bit tripped up when we want to look at the Torah as a science textbook. We're not told exactly how God created everything, but rather that God created everything, and that through him everything was created, that everything has its beginning in the beginning, meaning the Lord himself, and of course in his Messiah. Now, the study of Torah that we do together every week, whether it's Pearls of Torah or the Rashi Nash or Rega B'Ivrit, any of the teaching programs that we put out as a ministry, all of this is connecting us to the purpose of creation, because it is for the purpose of Messiah, it's for the purpose, of course, of Israel, and for the purpose of the Torah that everything has been created, and we have been given the opportunity to learn and to study. And this is something that is paramount, or should be paramount to us in our lives. There are many other things that can take us away and distract us from things that are truly important in life, but study of the Torah and prayer, engaging with this world in the aspect of Tikkun Olam, these are all things that are very, very important and are reflected back in the creation. Every Shabbat, whether it's the bringing in of Shabbat or the going out of Shabbat, we focus on the 6 days of creation and on that day of rest. Let's look at point number 2. Let us make man in our image. In Genesis 1:26, there is no doubt that this is plural language. Let us make man in our image. Now, of course, in the Christian world, there is a triune theology, and so in the Christian world there will be an interpretation of there being a plurality of God, or a triunity of God. How is it explained in the Jewish world? If a Jewish person is obviously coming from a background of not having a Trinitarian theology, then how does one explain the oneness of God and the statement, let us make man in our image? Well, as we've discussed before in Pearls of Torah, the Or HaChaim brings this up. Why does the Torah use plural language, let us? And there are a couple of interpretations that the Or HaChaim gives, and one of them is consultation with the angels, the heavenly court. That God consulted the angels saying, let us do this, as if angels had a part in creation, making God being, making the Lord humble by saying, let us do this, as if they were going to participate. So in other words, God consulted the angels to teach humility, even though they could not truly assist in creation. That this is done to give us an example that we need to consult people. This reminds us of the destruction of the cities of the plain, of Sodom and Gomorrah, the other cities of the plain, where God comes down, or these angelic beings come down, depending on your interpretation, and takes a look for themselves what is going on in the cities of the plain. Couldn't God see from heaven what was going on? Of course he could. But the commentators on the Torah say that God wanted to give us an example that you don't just take someone's word, you go and investigate it yourself. So that's number one, consultation with the angels. But what's another interpretation of why it says us? Let us make man. Well, this could refer, the Or HaChaim says, to the dual nature of humanity. The plural might refer to the fact that humans are composed both of physical, of the earthly, and spiritual, the heavenly components. We've talked many times before, because it's brought up in Hebrew 101, Biblical Hebrew and Jewish Thought Level 1 in our yeshiva, that the word for the human being, Adam, is made up of two components, the the Aleph, and the Dam. The word Dam in Hebrew means blood, and it refers to the physical part of our humanity, the physical body, the physicality. This is the Dam, the blood. But there is another part to us, the or the Aleph. You have an Aleph and Dam. The Aleph is a symbol of the Aluf, or the champion, God himself. So you have a part of us that is Dam, a part that is physical, that is blood, but you also have a part of us that is the Aleph, that is a part of the Almighty, as God breathed into humanity the breath of life, so that we have this dual nature. And this is very important for us to remember, that we have a dual nature, that we are human, but there's also a divine spark within us. This is something that we need to remember. Now, this looking at the plurality of human beings, of being human and divine, this teaches us a lesson in humility because of the Lord being humble, but also it teaches us about collaboration, about working with others, and about the complexity of human nature. Now, it is so important for us to remember that we are part of that divinity that God blew into Adam, that he blew into Adam and he became a divine soul, a living soul, as it is said in the scripture. Now, let's look at number 2 here, section number 2, the Shabbat and the completion of creation. This is from, of course, Genesis chapter 2, verses 1 through 3. Genesis 2:2 said, "And God completed on the seventh day his work that he had done." Now, interesting. He completed it on the seventh day, but didn't he complete his work on the sixth day and rest on the seventh day? Do we have a contradiction here? One of the things I love about Judaism is not being afraid to ask if there is a contradiction. And so this is what we must ask ourselves. Is there a contradiction here? Well, the Or HaChaim, he addresses this directly. The Or HaChaim asks why the verse seems to say that God completed his work on the seventh day when we know that the work was finished on the sixth day. So the Or HaChaim explains that what God did is created, if you will, menucha, rest. That he created the idea of rest on the seventh day. So it's an intangible creation that brings harmony to all prior acts of creation. So it's not a creation that is work. He created rest. What a nice concept for us, that it's not only that we follow God's example because he rested on the seventh day, but he himself is the inventor of rest. He created that ceasing from work. So the idea that Shabbat itself is a creation, this is something that is maybe new to you, but it's very much at home in Judaism and within the teachings of the Or HaChaim. So the cessation of work, the stopping of working, has a spiritual significance beyond the mere absence of labor. So it's not just not doing something, you are physically doing the rest. So it's not just an absence, it's that you are, it's going to sound funny to say, but you're putting the effort into the rest. You're getting everything done and prepared so that you can rest. And this is something that is very important. Section number 3 here, the creation of Adam and Chava, or Eve. In Genesis 2:7, it says, God formed man from the dust of the earth. And we learn in Hebrew 101 that, again, the word for human being, Adam, comes from the Adamah, which is the dust, the dirt. And this is something that is so beautiful about the Hebrew language, is that it is all related. It's all related. He explains that man is both created from dust and the breath of life, which once again proves to us the physical and spiritual nature of the human being. And it underscores the human potential for greatness or failure. Are we going to ascend to our divine level, that spark? We're going to redeem that spark? Or are we going to go down to the dust? Which part of ourselves are we going to emulate? Are we going to be like the dust? Or are we going to be like the heavenly part of us, the spiritual? Now, we obviously see a connection between the body and the spirit in human life and how each can affect the health of the other. This is so important. And also, we need to remember how to navigate between physical desires and spiritual aspirations. That's a big key to living a good life with the Lord, right? To live a victorious life is learning how to navigate those things. Let's look at our next section, section 3, the sin of Adam and Chava and its consequences. This, of course, comes from Genesis chapter 3. In Genesis 3:6, it says, "The woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was a delight to the eyes." Or HaChaim says that Chava was enticed by the fruit despite God's command. And he explains that the Yetzer Hara, or the evil inclination, works through physical desires, causing people to rationalize disobedience to divine will. Remember what it says in James chapter 1. I bring this up a lot in my teaching. We don't need some demon or Hasatan to tempt us. We do very well on our own with our own sinful desires, our own evil inclination. That's what James 1 says, that each of us are pulled away by our sinful desires. And this is what happens, that our physical desires are used as a tool by the Yetzer Hara to entice us to do something. Now, when we say, the devil or Hasatan or something like this, remember that in Judaism, there is an equivalency made between the evil inclination and between the adversary and between Satan himself and the angel of death, by the way. There's this equivalency put there. Now, what is interesting is the process of temptation and then rationalization. We rationalize why we should be able to do a certain thing, and we then give in to self-deception. We rationalize ourselves and we deceive ourselves. We rationalize to ourselves, deceive ourselves into thinking that that sinful desire that we have is okay, and we give in to it. Now, this, of course, needs to bring up to us the importance of self-awareness and accountability, not just to ourselves and to God, but to others that are in our circle, so that they can help keep us accountable. This concept of aravut and this concept of unity that we have in Judaism is so important, of keeping each other accountable, being a guarantor, and having the unity among us. Now, something that is looked at as maybe something negative, but something that can be truly positive that the Or HaChaim brings up, and that is that he placed the cheruvim at the east of the Garden of Eden. Now, it says there, the placement of the cheruvim, or the cherubim, and the flaming sword was not merely punitive. This is not just a punishment, but rather it is a symbol of God's continued presence and a way back to spiritual elevation. And what we should focus on in this moment is even in punishment, the concept that even in punishment, there is a pathway to return and a pathway toward redemption. So this idea of teshuvah and repentance, which we just focused on in the High Holy Days, it is a theme of this particular narrative. And sometimes the obstacles in our lives can really be spiritual opportunities for us to make the most of that situation and to return to the Lord in a way that is righteous. It's our goal to eventually get back to the garden. And then, of course, I just want to bring up just 6 key points that the Or HaChaim brings up in his commentary. So, of course, the purpose of creation, we talked about that. The idea of for the sake of the beginning, and who is the beginning? Let us make man. Or HaChaim brings this up as a plural statement. Again, is he talking about the dual nature of man? Or is he addressing the heavenly court? Is he addressing the angels? The creation of the Shabbat, the idea of creating rest itself, the sin of Adam and Eve, which, by the way, by extension, we could look at the sin of Cain killing his brother Abel, and how sin is crouching at the door, that we need to have the power to overcome sin through our free will. The nullification of the flesh or of the evil inclination, and the elevation of the Yetzer HaTov, or coming up from the idea of Nefesh Be'amah, the animal inclination, the animal desires, the animalistic nature, and to rise up into the level of Nefesh HaMaskelet. We have an ongoing struggle between good and evil, and this gives us the potential for sort of mastering those things. Sin is crouching at the door, but we can rule over it. We can become conquerors, and more than conquerors, the scripture says. And last but not least, number 6, we talked about the flaming sword. When Adam and Eve were expelled, that God places this keruv, or this pair of keruvim, and the flaming sword to guard the way to the tree of life, which eventually we will have access to again. So it's an interesting story, the story of the Or HaChaim, and the things that he had to face. And I like it that we talked earlier about him sharing thoughts of the Torah every Friday night with his daughters. You know, I enjoy sitting around the table and sharing things with my family, and I know you do as well. Maybe it's part of your Friday night ritual, and if it's not, maybe you should make it part of your Friday night ritual of getting together. Remember, in Pirkei Avot, we're told that if we sit at a table to eat and words of Torah are not exchanged, it's as if we're sitting at a table with food offered to idols. So we need to discuss these things. And I love it that he would explain things in a way that his daughters could understand, and that these things were eventually written down and become the commentary that we are basing this entire Torah cycle's lessons on, teaching on each Wednesday. So thank you for going on this new journey with me as we look at the Or HaChaim, and I pray that it will be a wonderful study for you. You might want to pick up a copy of the commentary set of Or HaChaim. There are obviously several editions. There's one that's put out by Art Scroll that I have, and then there's another one that I want to say the publisher might be called Monk. I can't remember. Don't quote me on that, but you can see various editions of the Or HaChaim in English, and of course you could get it in multiple languages, but my native tongue being English, I get it in English. So I pray that this is a meaningful time for you this year, this Torah cycle. Go on this adventure with us as we study the Torah each week from the perspective of the Or HaChaim, and let's see if the light of life doesn't shine on you and your family. Thank you once again for joining me for Pearls of the Torah. We will see you next week. Shalom and Kol Tuv.